My name is Tim Synan, and I am the director for Google Cloud's cloud business in Southeast Asia. So I'm based in Singapore, which has been my home for the last 15 years. I'm going to share with you some experiences in terms of how we think about organizations and how they could become data-driven, primarily focusing on 4 areas, which I will share with you. Now, why is this important for you? And you would have heard from the Honorable Minister, and you would have heard from Krungsri and the other speakers. Digitization is happening all around us. And it's really happening in every industry. So regardless of that industry, all industries are being disrupted with digital technologies. So as an example, the automotive industry, automobiles are really software-driven devices. And those software-driven devices need to be upgraded in the same way as your mobile phone or your tablet device. For drug discovery, technologies such as data, analytics, and artificial intelligence is just as important as chemistry. And the Honorable Minister talked about 5G. And in my humble opinion, 5G is one of the most transformative technologies that is going to have an impact on really accelerating disruption and transformation across every industry. This is happening. And this shift is only going to accelerate. And the future holds a lot of promise for consumers. It's great to be a consumer now with all of this innovation happening. But for you as business leaders, it also gives you opportunities as well to partner and collaborate differently across your extended networks. Now, because this digitization is happening, it's really happening at scale globally, but it's also happening in Southeast Asia. So Google and Temasek in Singapore have studied the size of the internet economy in Southeast Asia. We've done this for 3 years now. So this is the 3rd year that we've done this study, and we just recently published the 2019 edition of the Internet Economy. And the Internet Economy, by 2025, is going to be $300 billion. That's a big number. And this is really being driven through the fundamental changes of consumer behavior. We heard some of that through some of the previous speakers. But consumer behavior is changing. And this number is being impacted by certain industries. So online travel, online commerce, ride sharing as an example. All of these industries are combined that are growing the internet economy. So the internet economy will be about $100 billion in 2019. And you'll have a 3x increase in a couple of years. Those are some pretty amazing statistics when you think about it. Now, here in Southeast Asia, and in the largest economies, is home to 570 million people. So that's 570 million people in Indonesia, in Vietnam, in the Philippines, in Thailand, in Singapore. These countries, and of course in Thailand. So these countries combined offer enormous opportunity for all of you to provide new services and new opportunities to partner through a new digital landscape. So 10 years ago, around 4 in 5 Southeast Asian citizens were either online or had access to the internet. That's not a long time ago, that's only 10 years ago. And now there are approximately 360 million people of that 570 million people online with reliable internet. Now for Thailand, there are 47 million people who are currently online. And that's an increase from 36 million people from 2017. So consumers in Southeast Asia are using the internet for various reasons. The internet now is part of everyone's everyday life. We book our travel. We use ride-sharing services. We order goods and services online. We communicate with our families, with our friends, with our colleagues. We're watching videos online. So the consumer internet and the mobile internet in particular right now is embedded in everyone's everyday life, and it will continue to do so in the years to come. Now, Thailand is the most engaged country in the world. So internet users in Thailand, particularly mobile internet users in Thailand, spend over 5 hours a day on the mobile internet. So you as business leaders might want to check what your people are doing. I'm sure they're all watching corporate videos of your organizations online, when they're at work. But you can see how Thailand also ranks relative to some of the other countries in Southeast Asia. So Southeast Asia is amongst some of the most engaged mobile internet users globally, right? And the average is around 2 hours. So again, this presents opportunities for you to meet your customers, to meet your consumers where they are. So the challenge for you is to understand how you are going to package and create these new services and provide them within the context of what matters to consumers in Southeast Asia. And this internet economy in Southeast Asia really creates opportunities for you as business leaders, for you to partner and for you to collaborate differently. And what's really driving this are the three fundamental pillars of digital transformation. So traditionally, you would want to ensure that you have future-proofed your people, you have future-proofed your processes, and then your technology. These are fundamental pillars in any transformation program. But we're seeing that there's an emerging trend, and one that we talked about today, and that's data. And that's what I'm going to share a little bit of my experience in terms of how we work internally and then externally with customers who have adopted data and really pivoted their culture of their organization, around data. Now, we're fortunate at Google that we're able to work with organizations of all sizes in virtually every industry. And a lot of these organizations come to us and they ask us how they can accelerate their journey to become a data-driven organization. What do they need to change culturally in order to adopt data? But data certainly isn't new. It's not anything that we're not used to, and it has been around for forever. And data is obviously unique. It's the unique differentiator that all of you have, regardless of where you work. So from the dawn of time, from agriculture to navigation to advances in manufacturing research, people have leveraged data in order to advance their missions and their objectives. So though data is unique, the way we collect data has changed over time. So consider a simple example such as the weather. When people talk about the weather, they will use words such as, it's really hot, or it's really humid, or it's really muggy, if you live in Southeast Asia, or if you live in the north, it's cold, it's frigid, it's freezing, some of these things. But we only started measuring temperature in the mid-1600s. And so people prior to then didn't have a common vernacular of how they would express themselves. And then 200 years later, in 1873, the International Meteorological Organization was created. And what that allowed us to do is have a common way of measuring weather and temperature. And it's only after the Second World War where we globally standardized on how we capture and talk about the weather. I still don't know what's happening in the United States, however, because we're still using the Fahrenheit system whilst the rest of the world is using Celsius, but you can't really explain many things that's happening in the US nowadays. But data has always existed. How we collect it and how we use it has changed over time. Now, 2002 was the first year that digital data overtook analog data, 2002. And the compounded annual growth rate of data that's generated each year is around 60%. So we continue to create data across all different spectrums, and data is created at a velocity that is very difficult to comprehend. So a lot of us are effectively drowning in data. And the scale and accessibility to all of these different types of data is also a challenge. And that's one area where technology can help to overcome some of the challenges of how you capture, store, synthesize, and leverage data. Now, this is a picture of the port in Singapore, of a port terminal in Singapore. And just imagine the amount of data that is generated every hour, every day, every hour, every minute, every second. This is IoT data. This is sensor data, telemetry data, data on maintenance, health and safety. There's metadata around all of those products and services. It's really hard to capture all of that data without advances in technology, advances such as big data, IoT, analytics, and so forth. So scale and volume is a problem, but it's not a problem that you should be afraid of. It's a problem that you should embrace, assuming you have the right technology posture to achieve those objectives. Now, throughout this change, throughout this journey, people have also changed. We've adapted. We've become much more curious about data, and we like to challenge the status quo, especially in my company. My company has a bunch of millennials, and they like to and they're very challenging, but they challenge the status quo, and they generally do that by using data. So having a data-driven culture is really important because it's a team sport, right? It's not specific to a particular individual. Having an organization where you're encouraging people to really lean in and people to have voice and for people to have access to data should permeate across your entire organization. That's really important. And you as business leaders have a responsibility to ensure that you're empowering your teams and you're allowing them to do more with the data that they have. However, it's critical to know why they're using that data. Are they using that data as inspiration for them, or are they using it more rigorously to arrive at some sort of a decision? That's for you to decide, but what is critically important and what we see that advanced organizations do is that they give people in their organizations and they empower them, they give them access to data. Now, organizations that are connected, and kind of moving on to that theme, organizations that are connected generally have a data-driven culture, right? Data is really important, they emphasize that. And this is what an organization, what a connected organization looks like. So you're kind of moving beyond the tools and services that you provide in order to kind of access and synthesize data. These types of organizations build sustainable teams. They empower their teams, they build sustainable teams, and they give their teams purpose in the work that they do. So the work that they do for their organizations has utility, it has meaning. A connected organization, again, also is an organization that understands that data and artificial intelligence is something that is owned by everyone, right? It's not specific to your data scientists. It's not specific to your business analysts. It's not specific to a couple of people who have gone to some wonderful schools and they have the best engineering degrees. Data and artificial intelligence in particular, is, again, it's a team sport, and it's up to you to ensure that everyone is involved and everyone has voice. So just take a look at all of the types of stakeholders in your organizations if you're undergoing projects around data, artificial intelligence, and analytics. Ensuring that your project teams are connected, they collaborate, and they understand the outcomes of the projects that they are involved in, and how their work has meaning to whatever objective that you have is really important. So ensuring that your people are empowered is really important. They're connected and they collaborate with data at scale. Now, process is also very, very, very important. So we talked about technology, we talked about people, and then we talked about the process. It's important to consider a process that fosters the right culture, the right data culture in your organization. So how do your people leverage data when they're making a decision? Are they leveraging data to make a decision to basically make them feel good about a decision that's already been made? Or are they using data along the way in order to make an informed decision where there's debate and decision making as part of that process? That's really important, because the reality is that people oftentimes leverage evidence and view evidence through a convenient lens, through a way that means something for them. That's called a confirmation bias. And at Google, we work really hard to avoid biases. And I'll give you an example. So in my role, I hire a lot of people. And I have recruiters that work on my behalf, and they'll always give me a stack of CVs and resumes of some really talented people. And a recruiter will say to me, Tim, I think you should hire this person. She is the best qualified, she's fantastic, you'd be crazy not to hire her. Well, of course, I can't make a decision based on that person's perspective. That's a bias. So a healthy data culture is one that accepts what you do not know, and it encourages different points of view and decision-making along the way. And you leverage data to make an informed decision. It doesn't make the decision for you, right? So getting back to my Google example, when we do hire in our organization, we hire against particular dimensions, particular attributes that we want to have in a person, and then we assess a candidate against a set of rubrics that we have. So after all of the interviewers go through this process, I get a pack, of a data pack, for a particular individual, and then we go to what is called a hiring committee, and we have a really healthy debate about whether or not we should hire that particular candidate. So we're using data in a process where we're hopefully making informed decisions. So it's really important, and careful to understand the process that you enable in order to have the right outcomes for your people. Now, we mentioned a few things so far. So we mentioned the role of people, and your people want to collaborate, they need access, to data to derive meaningful insights, and they need to be empowered. And we talked about the process, right? Embedded process that will have the right culture and the right outcomes where people are emotionally involved using data, throughout that process. And of course, we talked about the technology, big data, IoT, artificial intelligence, analytics, and so forth. All of these things are really important to have a data-driven culture. But when these three elements come together, it's the interplay between them that really matters. It's the interplay that creates and fosters that data-driven culture. These don't happen in isolation from one another. They happen together. And it really is just that. It's really around a culture, and that culture that is incumbent upon yourselves as business leaders, which is a key driver of success, especially when it's a highly data-driven culture. So it's something that we talk a lot about at Google. It's something that we work, with our customers and organizations on in order to have them understand where they are today and how to move them to a data-driven culture in the future. Because when the culture of an organization empowers and connects users, that's when the magic happens. That's when sparks go off. That's when you get this concept of 10x thinking, big idea thinking. And as a result, people can leverage technology to innovate better. They can develop products and services faster. They can bring those products out to market faster. Because the reality is, in this digital disruption, this world that is changing all around us, competition is also increasing. So competition and collaboration in the market. So competition in terms of driving additional profits, reducing your operating expenses, all of these things matter. But if you have the right set of culture, that will set you up, for longer-term success. And we do think that some of the underlying technology platforms that are available today really help you accelerate your journey to have a data-driven culture. And all of that sparks innovation. And it's innovation that's achieved when the people feel emotionally involved and when they're empowered with technology and with insights. This is what we talk about a lot at Google, and we think about 10x. We always ask our people, are you thinking 10x? Is it an incremental improvement that you're trying to make today, or is it a significant improvement that is going to move the needle, as we say? So as an example, if you provide the same set of technology and data sets to two different teams, and you ask both of them to solve a really hard problem, or you ask them to innovate around something, the likelihood is that you're going to get two very different answers. And the reason is because of culture. So culture is fundamentally important. It's a hard thing to do, We work with so many organizations which are undergoing some sort of a transformation, but the culture has to be right in the middle. And it is that intersection which makes it happen. Now, let me give you a few examples of organizations that are doing this with us at scale. Now, these are 3 different types of organizations in 3 different regions and 3 different sizes. So some of you should know Hsbc. So Hsbc is one of the world's largest banks, and we're privileged to be able to work with them in terms of transforming themselves. They have a bold ambition of transforming financial services, but first they're going to transform themselves. And to do that, they've worked with us and other platforms to build a managed cloud platform. So that managed cloud platform improved their security, it improved their regulatory posture, it improved the reliability of their systems in the key markets that they operate in. So they have now about 150 petabytes of data in this managed cloud. And they started with 2 use cases. One was around liquidity reporting, and the second was around fraud and fraud analytics. So they built an algorithm for liquidity reporting so they can now, in their key markets, understand their country-by-country liquidity position in about 30 minutes. And before, it took them around 10 hours to do that. From a fraud detection perspective, they can now detect fraud 10 times faster than they did before. It's not in real time, but it's almost in real time. But that wouldn't have been possible had they not decided. They've got a very ambitious and talented CIO. If they didn't embrace this idea of culture and they use data fundamentally as the way to start their transformation. The second organization is AirAsia. So if you know Tony Fernandez, who's the CEO of AirAsia, he's a very gregarious, mercurial leader. But if you ask Tony for him to describe what AirAsia is, he would tell you that it's a technology company with a couple of airplanes. So they have embraced technology to power their digital transformation. They are fundamentally focused on ensuring that AirAsia is the most digitally savvy airline today. They're the largest low-cost airline in this part of the world, and they're using technology to help them advance their agenda. So we're just privileged to be able to work with them across their platform transformation. So they really started with a platform transformation, but what we're working with them right now on is to leverage data in order to help them reduce their operating expenses. So one example is reducing the fuel consumption. So when airplanes are on a tarmac and they're taxiing, that consumes a lot of fuel. And what we're doing, we're working with AirAsia, leveraging data and analytics in order to reduce that time. Because if we can save 1% of fuel consumption, that will have a significant effect on his balance sheet. We're also working with AirAsia, leveraging data and analytics to understand the propensity of someone to finish a booking. And once that booking is finished, the propensity of someone to actually fly with the airline, because apparently there are a lot of no-shows, right? We always complain about overbookings, all of us that travel, but from his perspective, he complains about underbooking. So if someone books on his airline and they don't show up, that seat could be resold to someone else. And data and analytics can help change that perspective for him. The last area that we're partnering with AirAsia on is a real fundamental change in the culture of their organization. So it's improving their digital literacy. So it really doesn't have to do with technology per se, but we're partnering closely with them on, making sure that they understand, what 10x thinking means. Making sure that they understand what agile development is. Making sure that they understand, what data science is, and so forth. So it's a real comprehensive relationship that we have with them, but I would say that the underlying denominator and what's making them successful is the culture and using data, which is driving that culture. The last example I will give is Gojek. So Gojek, as many of you probably know, is a close partner with Google's. We have a strategic partnership with Gojek. I've had the privilege of working with these guys for the last 4 years, and I've just watched them grow. I've watched them scale. They've largely built their platform on Google, and we're now helping them expand their services. So they have a very extensive service portfolio, and we're also helping them expand into other markets as well. What they do right now, through all of the services that they have, they primarily operate in Indonesia, but they've entered the market in Vietnam, and they'll soon be in Thailand and in other markets in Southeast Asia. They generate about 5 to 6 terabytes of data per day, and they capture and store everything. No data is wasted. So they capture all of that data every single day, and what they've now done is they've applied machine learning. So we talk a lot about artificial intelligence, but it's the branch of artificial intelligence which drives a lot of these outcomes is called machine learning. So machine learning applied to their data is helping them do better forecasting. So they can forecast hotspots, traffic hotspots in Jakarta as an example, and understand how they need to optimize the algorithm in their application to direct more drivers to that hotspot. They're using machine learning as well to help them from a pricing perspective. So the price is variable based on demand throughout the day. And if any of you have used Gojek or Grab or these others, I now know the reason why the price is so high during rush hour when I really need to get somewhere. When it's so low when it's not rush hour. That is by design. And a lot of that is driven through data and machine learning. So in summary, data-driven companies embody these certain characteristics. So they connect their creative and inquisitive people together, and they collaborate at scale. And that allows them to get more purposeful work done. Again, work that has utility for the organization, but also has meaning for themselves, for the individual. They're allowed to be inspired, so the organization allows them to be inspired by data and analytics, right? It's something that can be built upon. They break down silos. Organizations break down those silos. The Honorable Minister talked a little bit about breaking down those silos with the government cloud, which is an amazing initiative. They also apply intelligence to the data that they have, and they operate with trust. That's a critical factor in any transformation, regardless if it's a cultural transformation, a platform transformation, or whatever, but you operate with trust across people, your process, and your technology platforms. Right? This is what data-driven organizations do that have this culture. And at Google, we partner with organizations of all sizes, particularly my part of Google, which is Google Cloud, which is the enterprise part of Google. But we work with organizations of all sizes to really help them understand more about their data, but more importantly, align your IT assets with your data assets to have richer, more responsive customer relationships, which derive more value, more security, and leverage on data. So thank you very much for your time. Kap kun kab.